Hey there riders, Journo Kris here today with the Honda GB350. This is their new classic bike and I gotta say it's a little belter. Obviously the price on this is a big attraction point. These are just over $8,000 right away here in Australia, making for a very competitively priced entry-level machine or a machine perfect for someone who likes a bit more of a relaxed ride and is of course after the classic theme. We do have a little air-cooled 348cc single cylinder 2-valve. It's got a nice bit of torque, it's got a 5-speed gearbox. It is quite traditional in kind of the feel, but it has a nice level of refinement to it that is going to make it a rewarding engine for the vast majority of riders who are looking for this style of bike. This does have a couple of nice little extras in the engine department which are going to make it a little bit better for the modern rider. Slip and assist clutch, obviously that allows you to downshift a little more aggressively and it gives it a lighter clutch pull, which is very, very welcome for most riders. On top of that, we're also getting traction control and that is switchable. You can turn it off through the dash. And so as far as like the safety features, traction control and ABS on this old school looking machine. Now the finish quality and the style of the bike is an absolute standout to me. I love the single front headlight. It is an LED headlight, so you're getting the best of both worlds there. You're getting this beautiful chromed exhaust as well. It's got quite a nice note to it. It is not a mechanically loud engine at all. It's just the pure exhaust note. And again, that comes back to that refinement. And then on top of that, we're getting these cool cast rims. They are a little bit more modern. We're getting a 19 on the front and 18 on the rear. However, the bike is very nicely balanced between the front and the rear, which certainly plays into a really nice handling characteristic. Disc brakes front and rear, which again is the norm, but a nice kind of formidable setup for the style of bike. And certainly while it is the classically styled bike, we're getting the nice low seat height, we're getting the nice finish quality and a very accessible overall machine. So let's have a quick look at the ergos and then I'll move on to the rest of the bike. Nice, easy, relaxed ergonomics. Obviously you can see here I've got a pretty good 90-degree angle at the legs. I'm a 32-inch inseam, so I'm a bit leggier and a little shorter in the torso. Nice, easy reach to these quite wide bars. There's a nice bit of like curve back to me as the rider, which makes it a very, very relaxed seating position. Obviously, a little bit of a slump to the back, so there's not going to be any back issues for people who are concerned about that. And the seat, it's got like kind of a nice buckety kind of seat at the front here in that leather finish, and there is room for a pillion. Not that I'd really generally recommend this kind of style of bike as a machine to consider if you're doing lots of pillion work, but in an emergency or for shorter rides just down to a cafe with the missus on the back, this will do you. And yeah, really nice, good vision through those mirrors. When I've got my helmet on, the dash is at the bottom of my vision. I don't need to glance down and I can see the indicator light on the dash to see whether I've accidentally left those on. So pretty much perfect as far as what a new rider would want or just what I would consider a nice relaxed ergo that's going to suit most people. You can also see here I've got both feet down flat. It is reasonably narrow between the legs, not as narrow as some of the naked and sports bikes obviously, because this is a slightly wider style of bike just with the classic styling, but quite manageable overall. So it should work for people who are a bit shorter than me quite easily. I think the seat height is around the 800mm mark. I'll have to double check that. And probably the big standout to me is how well the weight on this bike is carried. Nice and light, it's quite a nimble machine. Certainly if you're pushing it around in a car park like this, it won't feel particularly light. When you're riding it, that nice low center of gravity is an absolute pleasure to ride and makes the bike feel significantly lighter than it actually is on paper. Now, as far as the engine that we really do need to talk about a little bit more, obviously this style of machine is never going to be a powerhouse, and that is true here as well. 5-speed gearbox, I did originally kind of think to myself, oh, it would have been nice to have a 6-speed. I think you can get 100, 110, maybe 120 on this, but you do need to quite actively use the gearbox. There is a little bit of a power band to keep it in if you want the most torque possible. If you're just looking for a relaxing and easy ride, it's a nice and forgiving machine that you should be able to ride quite casually and be very lazy through the gearbox, but you will get the most out of it by being a little bit active through those gears. And I would say you'll notice the point where you've shifted up a little bit early, because the power will drop off and it gets a little bit flat. You hold that gearbox or you hold that gear a little bit longer before switching up through the gearbox, keep it in the power band, and it does have better power and torque on demand. So certainly to me, it does tick the boxes there. My one complaint would be that throttle, particularly in the low gears with the opening throttle, and certainly coming back on the power if you've closed the throttle for whatever reason, it can be just a little bit abrupt, but this bike is brand new. I think it had less than 10 Ks on it when I picked it up from MotoHub today. So it is worth keeping in mind. This bike has in no way been run in. It is absolutely brand new. Still got the new bike smell. So I'll rip a little engine there. I do like the gearbox. It's an easy engagement gearbox, goes into gear nice and easily. And yeah, just a super fun thing to ride as far as putting the power to the ground and making the most of it, but not a powerhouse, as I said. And the refinement of the engine is an absolute standout. It is very obviously a Honda and very obviously also made in Japan, despite the highly competitive price. Moving back to the front of the bike, obviously we've got the 19-inch front wheel. We've got a reasonably large disc on the front. I think it's a 300 or a 310 and a 2-piston Nissan caliper. So that is a nice brake setup. Only a regular master cylinder, not a radial master cylinder, which we'd never expect on a bike like this. And again, for the price, it's less surprising. There aren't adjustable levers on both sides, but that's kind of a little bit more borderline in my mind. The braking system is good. There's nice power front and rear. It is not a super bitey brake system. Plenty of stopping power for the style of bike and for the style of riding you do. And overall, I really can't complain. It's got ABS. I haven't had any ABS activations today at all. So in that regard, I think if it was oversensitive, I probably would have noticed by now, but I'm pretty happy with that overall. Disc brakes front and rear, which is just what you'd expect. I think it's a little bit cheeky to be trying to put a drum brake on even a classic style machine in 2024. And so overall, to me, the Honda GB350 is very much delivering on the braking department. Then moving on to the suspension, we've got the inverted forks here. As you can see, they are non-adjustable, so that is worth keeping in mind. I'm 75 or so kilos. I've got a 10 kilo camera bag as well. I found the suspension setup really quite ideal. At times, I've actually kind of been bumped out of the seat over a really big bump at the rear. However, it's been surprisingly controlled. It's not so much abrupt, it's just that there's so much movement that the bike has kind of bumped me up out of the seat. But that's only once or twice on some of the really rough bits along the old road here. So I really have to forgive the bike for that. I feel like the preload, I could adjust a little bit on the rear, maybe soften it up a little bit. But I think for a one-size-fits-all suspension setup with only preload adjustability on the 2 rear shocks, it is a pretty formidable system and a pretty impressive system overall. And certainly if you're on better roads than I'm on today, because these aren't the best roads realistically speaking, you're going to be even happier with the suspension setup on this bike, which is going to be a good thing. If you're a significantly heavier rider, I'm not so sure where the limitations are going to be of the suspension, but like I said, for 75, 85 kilos, you know, plus a bit of gear, I think you'll be right, and I think you'll be pretty happy with this bike overall. Having a quick look at the back of the bike, I've got to be careful putting my hand on that seat because it is hot, but we've got a nice grab rail here, which obviously if you do have a pillion on the back is going to be great. You've got some tie down points, which is very thoughtful of Honda as well, so you can tie something on the back, which I think is probably going to be far more common than a pillion. As I mentioned, you've got the disc brake on the back, you have the shocks on the back as well, and you've got this very enticingly styled exhaust, which looks the business and sounds the business. Not loud by any means, but it's certainly a really cool looking exhaust to my mind, and a nice finish quality on it as well, which matches some of those kind of chromed parts that we do see, particularly on the exhaust, you know, a little bit on the shock, a little bit on the engine cases. It is kept fairly minimal, but it really does work. As far as the paint, we've got basically kind of like a matte speckled paint on the tank, nice big 15-litre tank. It is not matched on the tail or on the front guard. They are the same style paint, but they are a blacky charcoal kind of paint instead. So that's a little bit different, and that's actually matched by like the handlebar risers and the top triple and the headlights. So nice attention to detail there. And obviously you're getting kind of like almost like a two-tone effect. And then on the engine side of things, you're getting a lot of blacked out features, which to me, I kind of prefer. I think a blacked out engine is going to stay much, much cleaner, but some people who want a classically styled bike do want the full polished engine, so obviously that's going to kind of come down to your personal preference. If we have a little bit of a talk about the controls, obviously rubber clad pegs there, which is nice. I only really found any vibrations when I really revved the engine, perhaps a little bit more than I should have. The vibrations did appear at the bars first, and then eventually you'd feel them a little bit in the pegs. The bars, I would say that tiny little vibration is probably going to be a little bit more normal if you're pushing the revs a little. You're probably overdoing it if the pegs are vibrating as well. So just keep that in mind. You know, pretty simple, regular, ride your motorcycle the way it's intended to be ridden. Don't ride it outside the envelope and you'll be fine. So what's the GB350 like to ride? I've just got to be honest, it's awesome. It is a great, great bike. I think what stands out to me is its nicely balanced front and rear between obviously the front suspension and the rear suspension, and those wheel sizes. It's got nice narrow wheels, so it is a fairly nimble handler, which again is what you want. You want something that's very manageable and is quite responsive. It doesn't feel like a heavy bike at all. It feels like a much, much lighter bike. It carries its weight exceptionally, and combining that nice handling characteristic with a pretty willing engine despite limited power and good torque, and you've just got a winner all around. You're gonna have a lot of fun on this kind of bike, as long as you're not an absolute rev head. And if you're a rev head, you're not looking at this bike, let's be honest. Or maybe you're getting one of these as your daily run around because you're a little bit sick of riding your Fireblade through traffic, and this is certainly going to be a fun thing to ride and quite rewarding in a totally different way. So definitely ticks all around from me. I think the $8,000 or so buy-in, nice and competitive, made in Japan. So obviously where we're seeing a lot more bikes made in India or Thailand, it is really great to see obviously something made in Japan, and I think that is carried across in the greater build quality that I'm seeing. While there is still some plastic, it's very tastefully done, the finish quality is good, and overall there's just nothing I can complain about. I have been absolutely blown away by this bike. I think it is a really, really good new entry to the market, and it's going to be pretty tough competition for the Royal Enfield 350s, particularly adding the traction control, which is a nice little extra, which is, it's just one of those features that if you're a more safety orientated person is going to be a big tick for you, particularly with the competitive price. So absolutely great job from Honda, and a big thanks to MotoHub for lending me the bike for the day while my 401 was being serviced. If you've got any questions at all, just let me know down in the comments. As always, stay safe out there, and thanks for watching.